when it comes to Shakespeare, maybe you're a little bit like me, and your mother tongue isn't English and you feel a bit daunted by the text. That's how I'm feeling. I'm making my way through Hamlet for the first time in my life, and it's a difficult text to wrangle with, but it's extremely illuminating as well. What a treat to the Philosopher's Mind this piece is. I recently listened to a podcast, I think it was called Philosophy Without Any Gaps or something like that, and the host said that something along the lines of how difficult it would be to watch Hamlet actually in the theater as a play, because there's so many moral and philosophical themes that you're just constantly getting distracted. That's how I feel reading Hamlet. It seems that the plot is not actually what Hamlet is about, so it's also a bit difficult to keep up with the plot. I don't know, even though not a lot is happening, but my attempt today is trying to illuminate that, showing you all the notes I took while reading Act 2, drawing some connections to other pieces of work, and just, hoping to transfer the sense of being mesmerized that I have when I read Shakespeare to you, because I think these quotes are completely wonderful. So many of them have made it into our culture and we don't even know they're from Shakespeare. Just listen to this, for example. So Polonius says, "But breathe his folds so quaintly, that they may seem the traits of liberty, the flesh and outbreak of a fiery mind." So Polonius is my favorite. If you've watched my video on Act 1, I have quoted him extensively there as well. And I really wonder why I like him so much. I listened to some other interpretations of Hamlet, and I think it was actually Benjamin McAvoy who brought this point up, that Polonius is really, he really likes to hide and, be a little bit in the shadow and observe people and make judgments about what he thinks they're going through. So, that is definitely something I do. I sometimes do that a bit too much, thinking I know what is going on with people or what they would need. But also he's a peacekeeper, so I don't know. Let's go back to the scene where he says, "Breathe his folds so quaintly." So he's talking to someone, and he's giving that man the advice to not put another man down for his faults, right? Or his shortcomings. So he says, "Breathe his faults so quaintly, they may seem the traits of liberty, the flesh and outbreak of a fiery mind, the savageness of unreclaimed blood." And it's interesting that he says, "Breathe his faults so quaintly," because breathing, the way we breathe, really makes all the difference. And if you've done any, yoga or breath work or any practice like that, you know that. You've probably experienced that. I remember someone saying once that the difference between anxiety and excitement is the depth of breath. So that they seem the traits of liberty, right? The traits of a genius, maybe. If I think about the people I most admire intellectually or creatively or something, those people usually have really, really big flaws. And I'm wondering whether that is just a deal that has to be made. It's a trade-off or something. Maybe liberty also just means not adhering to a structure of good and bad. But I don't know, we do that with people, or I do that with people. I excuse their flaws in a way if they're doing something great. I don't know if that is a good thing. Let me know what you think. Should we cut people some slack? I think maybe people don't have to adhere to our standards of good and bad. What would happen if we don't do that? What is the creative act and the creative mind, and what can it be preoccupied with, and what can't it? All of these are, outward questions, I think, that are really interesting. Questions, by the way, is one of the most used words in Shakespeare's Hamlet. I read in this edition by Harold Bloom about Shakespeare, which I've shared before, The Invention of the Human. He says that the play is so preoccupied with the word question, right, which is wonderful, because not only are there so many questions in there, it's also the word question in there, and then also it throws up so many questions. It's just perfect. But Polonius always gives good advice, and he a bit later says, by indirections find directions out, right? And also he's giving that man the advice to observe his inclination in yourself, right? So if someone is doing something you don't like, first observe his inclination in yourself. That really made me think of the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Oh, where is it? Oh, it's here. This is a really, really wonderful book. I can highly recommend. You probably know it, but also this translation by Gregory Hayes is wonderful. And he says in book 10 that when faced with people's bad behavior, turn around and ask when you have acted like that. When you saw money as a good or pleasure or social position, your anger will subside as soon as you recognize that they acted under compulsion. What else could they do? Yeah, and this is also a time where I think I noticed an error in translation. If you speak German, please let me know what you think in the comments below. But in the English version, Polonius says, observe his inclination in yourself. And in the German version, he says, beobachte du auch selber sein Betragen, which would mean observe his inclination yourself, which is completely different from in yourself, right? Because the other one is still looking towards the other person, and the other one, like what Shakespeare meant, is looking inwards. At least that's what I think he meant. Let's quickly talk about what actually happens in Act 2. So two of Hamlet's friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, are talking to Claudius, which is the new king, Hamlet's uncle, and Gertrude, Hamlet's mother. They're all a little bit concerned about Hamlet. He seems to not get over his grief for his father. He seems to show some strange behavior. He's saying weird things. Yeah, so here's a little excerpt of Ophelia describing his behavior. He raised a sigh so piteous and profound, and it did seem to shadow all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes, for out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bendeth their light on me. Polonius is convinced that Hamlet is madly in love with his daughter Ophelia, and that's why he's going a bit insane. So Polonius does it again, right? He has this presumption, he presumes to know what is going on. He says, this is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property fordoes itself, and leads the will to desperate undertakings, as oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures. Then just a few lines below that, he says something I find even more beautiful and thought-provoking. He says, by heaven, it is as proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves in our opinions as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Okay, let's pick that apart a little bit. So it is proper to our age means it is proper to, you know, when you're at this age, which means when you're a bit older, to cast beyond ourselves in our opinions. That means, I think, to have prejudices, to have judgments, right? To be faster in our assuming things than, you know, we can actually make sure whether things are the way they are. I find that thought-provoking, so, you know, think about it yourself. Do you feel like you have discretion, but also you're a bit judgmental? Or do you feel like you don't have both of those, right? I think it would be a real attribute of a developed character to say you're developing discretion, but you're also working on lowering your prejudices and quick judgments of people. Claudius and Gertrude want the friends to go see Hamlet and to see what's going on, right? They say, "Sith nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was." So Hamlet seems to really not be like himself anymore. But that line, "nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was," makes me think, do we all have an inward man or woman and an outward man or woman? You know, do we have one version we show to people and one that we actually are? Is that what the discussion on authenticity is about, to maybe bring those two together? I think that would be a wonderful pursuit. Or is he more talking about the exterior man in terms of how he behaves and how he maybe the clothes he wears and the expression on his face, and the inward man is more his emotional life? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Let me know what comes up when you hear the inward man and the outward man. I think another interesting point that Bloom makes in here is how strange it is that Hamlet even exists. Like how did his parents make someone that is so intellectually impossible to wrangle with? I'm just gonna read you this quote because he said it way better. He said, "Shakespeare, with great care, even guile, gives us a father and a son totally unlike each other in elder Hamlet and the prince. How did Hamlet and Gertrude engender a son so intellectual that he cannot be contextualized even by Shakespeare's play? Prince Hamlet actually has no more resemblance to his father than he has to his usurping uncle." Yeah, he just seems completely dropped into the play. Actually, at around this point of the play, I noted down how, you know, just beautiful detail I noticed is that up until this point, we haven't really heard Hamlet a lot in the play yet. Everything we know about him is what other people have said, and that's really intriguing. Like, it makes me wonder, it makes me miss him a lot in the play, and I just think that's really great writing. That's beautiful style right there. Oh, and we just keep going with the Polonius quotes. A little bit later, Gertrude asks him to basically hurry up a bit, you know, like get to the point, say what you want to say without all the fluff. And he says, "Why, day is day, night night, and time is time. We're nothing but to waste night, day, and time. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief." That is just beautiful writing right there, and that brevity is the soul of wit. How wonderful. A friend of mine once told me that he heard of a letter correspondence between two authors, and the one author, started a letter to the other one saying, I don't have time to write you a short letter, so I'm gonna write you a long one. Just alluding to how difficult it is to be concise. Furthermore, Polonius talks about Hamlet's state, and he says, he fell into a sadness, then into a fast, thence to a watch, thence into a weakness, thence to a lightness, and by this declension into the madness wherein he now raves, and all we mourn. Yeah, how accurate is this? If you've ever gone through something difficult or a big amount of sadness or grief, let me know if you recognize this. You first fall into a sadness, then into a fast, so you stop eating, thence to a watch, thence into a weakness, right? You get weaker and weaker. Thence to a lightness, it all lifts up. And by this declension into the madness wherein now he raves, and all we mourn for. I'm in awe how this man could describe such a cycle so well. If you know anything about mental illnesses, you know that if you're at risk to going into a psychosis, or if that happens very easily for you, you should really not fast or lose sleep, right? So I don't know, made me think of that. By the way, just look at how hectic my notes are on this. Like, all the green ones are Act 2. That is very excessive, even for me. I think there's probably a note on every page. So Polonius, further talking to the king, is determined to find out the truth, and he says, where truth is hid, though it were hid indeed within the center. Right, so truth always hides in the center. It hides in plain sight. Makes me think of that saying by some mystic that if you cannot find truth wherever you are, right in front of you, where else do you expect to find it? Yeah, it's always right there. It's more about sharpening your senses than it is about going places. Yeah, and then Polonius is talking to Hamlet, and Hamlet seems to avoid his questions. Or is he? I'm not entirely sure. He gives these very strange but very intelligent answers to Polonius' questions, right? When Polonius asks what he's reading, Hamlet says, words, words, words. He also says, to be honest, as this world goes, is to be one man picked out of 10,000. So Polonius realizes that Hamlet sounds a little bit nuts, but he also realizes that his answers are extremely intelligent. And then he says something that has really, this phrase has stuck around. Let me put it this way, I'm sure you know it. So Polonius says to himself, though this be madness, yet there is method in it. I immediately had to think of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Where is it? Oh. If you've ever read A Midsummer Night's Dream, I think you know what I'm talking about. There's this wonderful speech towards the end. I think it's beginning of Act 5. If you have it, please look at it with me now. This is so near and dear to my heart, this entire play, but also the speech is wonderful, right? So Polonius says, though this be madness, yet there is method in it. I think it's Shakespeare's way of wrangling with this question of where does madness start? Is madness a requirement to be genius, right? And also in A Midsummer Night's Dream, right, there's this speech by Theseus, and he says, Lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason ever comprehends. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact. So, as I've already said in my first video, this Hamlet play is really getting out of hand. I feel it again, like I've never had such a long script for a video. There's so many notes scattered everywhere, I just can't seem to contain it. I've been filming for so long that the light keeps changing. But yeah, I don't know, I have a certain frustration with this piece where I can't seem to contain it. But I also can't let anything out. Like the next quote. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come in, right? And Hamlet realizes immediately that they were sent for, right? He says, you were sent for, and there is a kind of confession in your looks, which your modesties have not craft enough to color. But before that, he asks him, he asks them, how are you doing? I think this is extremely interesting. Rosencrantz says, as the indifferent children of the earth, and Guildenstern, happy in that we're not over happy. Yeah, and that really stuck with me, that thought that you should be happy if you're not over happy, right? You're not on the constant up and down on the wheel of samsara, if you want. It also really made me think of an insight a friend of mine once had on LSD. He said he was in such a blissful state that it actually became painful, and that he had this insight that too much pleasure is actually painful, right? And I think the opposite is true as well, where a lot of pain, if you're really in deep, deep, deep pain and grief, there also comes this lightness at a certain point, or even a joy or something. So, you know, that maybe the spectrum of pleasure and pain is not a line, but it's actually a circle, and if you go far enough into either one, you'll just come out the other side. Yeah, some more on the dialogue between Rosencrantz and Hamlet. Rosencrantz says, none, my lord, but the world's grown honest. And Hamlet says, then is doomsday near. Hamlet again, why then 'tis none to you, for there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Another really known one. As well as a dream itself is but a shadow. So towards the end of the scene, Hamlet meets with a group of actors. What touched my heart a lot is when Hamlet calls actors the abstract and brief chronicles of the time. Yeah, how wonderful is that? Yeah, and then Polonius says that he'll take care of the actors. I will use them according to their desert, right? According to what they deserve. And Hamlet says, no, you have to treat them better. He says, God's bodkin, man, much better. Use every man after his desert, and who shall scape whipping? Use them after your own honor and dignity. The less they deserve, the more merit is in your bounty. Take them in, yeah. So, don't treat men after what they deserve, but after your own honor and dignity. And way at the end of the scene, he is alone again, and he immediately falls back into this melancholy, right? His melancholy and his kind of irony and detachment, and it makes Hamlet a very, today I think nowadays we would say he's depressed, right? His inability to act is also reflecting that. But back then people said melancholy because there was this theory of the four humours that responded to the four liquids in the body, right? We have four different liquids in the body, and the theory was that if they're balanced, then you're balanced, right? And one of the illnesses you can have is melancholy. And melancholy was the disease of the scholars and the intellectuals. And it was a little bit fashionable at the time, even because it was always linked to the intellect. And towards the end, Hamlet decides that he will set up a play to catch the king's conscience, right? He'll ask the actors to perform a play where the king gets killed, and he's gonna like observe Claudius and see how he responds to that. I would like to read you the last 2 pages of Hamlet's monologue now, and when you listen to it, pay close attention to his melancholy, his inner struggle, to the 4 liquid, to his take on acting. It's a wonderful scene. Now I am alone. Oh, what a rock and peasant slave am I! Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit, that from her working all his visage wanted, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing. For Hecuba, what's Hecuba to him or he to her, that he should weep for her? What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage in tears, and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant, and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peak like Jonah dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing. No, not for a king, upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain, breaks my pad across, plucks off my beard and blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose and gives me the lie in the throat, as deep as to the lungs? Who does me this? Huh? Swoons, I should take it, for it cannot be. But I am pigeon-livered and lack gall to make oppression bitter or ere this. I should have fatted at the reaching kites with this slave's awful, bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. Why, what an ass am I! This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must like a whore unpack my heart with words, and fall a-cursing like a very drab scullion. Fie upon it, foe. About my brains, I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefaction. For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ. I will have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. I'll tend him to the quick. If it do blench, I know my course. The spirit that I've seen may be a devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king.